Imagine being 10 years old, stepping onto a basketball court filled with hope, excitement, and the dream of leading your team to victory. For Marcus Johnson, this tournament wasn't just about basketball. It was about proving his skills, his worth, and representing his school with pride. But what started as a competition quickly became something much bigger. In the middle of the game, Marcus was hit with a wave of racism so blatant and cruel that it left him speechless. In that moment, everything changed. Most kids would have kept quiet, let it slide, maybe hoped that no one noticed. But not Marcus. He chose a different path, one that would not only challenge the injustice he faced but inspire everyone around him. What happened next left the entire gym stunned. But before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy stories with unexpected twists and life-changing moments, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The Detroit Gymnasium seemed to pulse with life. The sound of bouncing basketballs, mixed with the echoes of voices from the stands, created an almost chaotic symphony, but for 10-year-old Marcus Johnson, each sound brought a unique emotion. The air, thick with expectation, enveloped the boy, who, with his worn sneakers and school jersey clinging to his body, felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He knew this tournament was important, not just for his school, but for his future as an athlete. Coach Thompson, always careful with his words, had told him before the game, "Remember, Marcus, true victory is found in overcoming. The score doesn't matter as much as what you do when challenges arise." While warming up, Marcus looked around. His sharp eyes took in every detail, the opposing coach standing stiffly, the rival players whispering among themselves, and somehow, those looks cast his way weren't normal. Marcus had played in other tournaments, felt the pre-game jitters of competition, but this was different. Something in the air told him that the challenge here wouldn't just be physical. There was a latent tension, as if everyone around was waiting for something, but no one knew exactly what. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease and focus on the game, but that feeling lingered in his mind. Sitting on the bench, waiting for the game to begin, Marcus overheard scattered comments floating through the gym. They were low, malicious whispers, mingled with the cheers of the crowd. "They think they can win with him," said a voice he couldn't place. He turned his head, searching for the source of the comment, but only saw forced smiles and averted gazes. It was as if everything around him was shrouded in a fog of tension and discomfort. The boy tried to ignore it, but he knew something was off. He had never felt this way before a game. "Am I just imagining things?" he thought. But the doubt clung to him like a shadow, growing with every passing second. When the starting whistle blew, Marcus tried to focus. The first plays flowed as usual. He dribbled with the agility that made him a standout on his team, passed the ball with precision, and easily made his way to the basket. But with each shot, with every dribble, he could feel those eyes on him. It wasn't the kind of attention a player usually received. It wasn't admiration or respect. It was something darker, something filled with judgment. His teammates didn't seem to notice, or, if they did, they chose not to speak about it. But Marcus couldn't shake it off. That tension was about to erupt. During the first break, while the team gathered around Coach Thompson for instructions, Marcus felt his body tense, as if preparing for a battle that hadn't fully materialized yet. His teammates were unusually quiet, more withdrawn than normal. "You felt it too, right?" whispered one of his friends. Marcus just nodded, unsure of how to put into words what he was feeling. They all knew this wasn't just any game, but no one was ready to speak openly about the discomfort. The coach, unaware of what was going on in the players' hearts, continued with his strategy talk. To him, it was just another match. When the second half started, Marcus returned to the court with the same determination as always, but inside, something had shifted. Every move he made was accompanied by the weight of that hostile environment. During a quick play near the sideline, He clearly heard one of the opposing players make a cutting remark. "Let's see if he can really do it," followed by a muffled laugh. Marcus tried to ignore it, but the comment stuck in his mind. This wasn't just sports rivalry. There was something deeper, something that shouldn't be present in a children's competition. For a moment, he felt small, but then his determination returned. "I can do this," he thought, clenching his fists. In the following minutes, Marcus pushed himself to maintain focus. The game remained close, but he couldn't shake the feeling that, more than just a basketball match, he was facing something larger. The tension was almost tangible, and with each passing minute, it seemed to intensify. His teammates sensed it too. Some exchanged nervous glances, tense expressions, but no one said anything. Coach Thompson, noticing the change in Marcus's demeanor, called him aside during a quick timeout. "Are you okay?" he asked, looking the boy in the eye. Marcus just nodded, but deep down, he knew he wasn't. By the end of the third quarter, Marcus was exhausted, not just physically, but mentally. The pressure of being at the center of something he still couldn't fully understand was starting to wear him down. The opposing coach, always with that cold, disdainful look, seemed to enjoy the situation. He paced along the sidelines, barking orders at his team but always finding time to throw a direct glance at Marcus, as if purposely trying to make him uncomfortable. And it was working. Marcus tried to ignore it, but the weight of those looks, the stifled laughter, and the harsh remarks were becoming unbearable. At the start of the final quarter, Marcus knew he needed to push beyond his limits. He had always believed that an athlete's true strength lay in the mind, more than in the body. But right now, his mind was conflicted. He wanted to keep playing, wanted to win, but what he was up against couldn't be overcome with skill alone. There was an invisible obstacle before him, something that would require courage and resilience. He needed faith, not just in his abilities, but in something greater. He had to believe that, somehow, he would transform this situation and come out stronger. The game dragged on, and the score remained tight. Marcus did everything he could to help his team, but the environment around him seemed to be working against him. Every dribble, every pass, every shot felt heavier, as if he were carrying something much larger than expected. The stares continued, the whispers didn't stop, and he knew that something was about to happen. The final whistle was approaching, and with it, the realization that this game, this tournament, wasn't just about basketball. Marcus was about to face something much deeper and more painful. And, even without fully understanding what was coming next, he knew he would need all his courage to keep going. The game was intense, with both teams giving their all in every play. Marcus, with his usual agility, was driving the ball down the court, trying to focus solely on the game, but something was still bothering him. As he approached the basket, an opponent intercepted him, blocking his path. In the heat of the moment, a cutting remark echoed across the court. "You'll never be good enough, boy." The words, filled with prejudice, pierced Marcus's mind like a sharp knife. The boy stopped for a second, shocked, the sound of the words reverberating in his head as the court fell into an uncomfortable silence. Everyone around clearly heard what was said. The opposing team exchanged nervous glances, while the referee hesitated, unsure of how to handle the situation. Marcus, his heart racing, tried to process what had just happened. He had heard of incidents like this before, but he had never experienced something like it himself. The insult wasn't just about the game, it was personal, something that attacked him in a way that left him speechless. He looked around, searching for support in the faces of his teammates, but the discomfort in the air was palpable. Everyone seemed frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. Coach Thompson, realizing what was happening, quickly stood up from the bench. "Hey, what's going on here?" he shouted, his voice cutting through the silence. He approached the referee, who still seemed indecisive about what to do. The murmurs in the stands began to grow louder as the spectators, who initially hadn't fully understood what had been said, started to grasp the severity of the situation. Marcus, still in shock, tried to gather his thoughts. He knew that what had been said wasn't just a casual taunt. It was a direct offense, something that touched on issues far deeper than basketball. As the opposing team tried to brush off the incident, claiming it was just a joke, Marcus felt a knot forming in his throat. He knew it wasn't a joke, and the way it had been said made the malice behind the words all too clear. The looks, the whispers, everything now made sense. He wasn't just an opponent on the court. He was the target of something that went far beyond the game. The emotional pain he was feeling was something he didn't know how to handle, especially in that moment. The words echoed in his mind, and he struggled to keep his composure. His faith in fairness began to waver. The minutes that followed were marked by tense silence. The referee, finally deciding to act, signaled for the game to continue, as if nothing had happened. Marcus looked down at the floor, trying to process the situation. Could he just let this go? Could he simply return to the game as if everything was normal? An internal battle began to form in his mind. He wanted to ignore it, wanted to focus on the game, but the insult had cut too deep to be ignored. His teammates watched him with concerned expressions, waiting to see how he would respond. What Marcus chose to do next would be a turning point for everyone present. As the game continued, Marcus tried to regain his focus. He took the ball and moved toward the basket, but the words still echoed in his mind. With every movement, every dribble, he felt the weight of the insult pressing down on him. He had faced physical challenges in basketball before, but never something like this. This was a different kind of adversity, one that couldn't be overcome with skill or strategy alone. It was an emotional battle, and he knew he would need immense courage to confront it. As he ran down the court, a mix of anger, sadness, and frustration bubbled up inside him. During the next time out, Marcus sat on the bench, breathing heavily. Coach Thompson tried to lift his spirits, but he knew there was something deeper going on. "Marcus, don't let this get to you. Show them who you really are with your game," the coach said, trying to restore the boy's confidence. But Marcus knew the problem was bigger than basketball. He looked at his teammates, who exchanged glances of solidarity, but no one knew what to say. Everyone had witnessed what had happened, but silence prevailed. The game was supposed to go on, but how could he play with the weight of something so heavy? As the game neared its end, Marcus was still torn. He knew he needed to stay focused on the game, but the words spoken earlier still haunted him. In moments like this, his faith in what was right and just was being tested. He wanted to keep playing, to show that nothing could break his spirit, but at the same time, he felt that something had to be done. He couldn't let this pass without consequence. As the game clock ticked down to the final seconds, Marcus already knew that he would have to confront this situation head-on, even if it meant interrupting the game. The final whistle blew, and the opposing team won by a narrow margin. Marcus, however, didn't feel the weight of the loss on the scoreboard. The real weight was in his heart, in his mind. He knew that what had happened couldn't simply be forgotten. As the opposing players celebrated their victory, Marcus felt that a choice had to be made. He couldn't stay silent. He was young, but he understood that some battles needed to be fought, regardless of age or experience. He looked at Coach Thompson and his parents, who watched from the stands, as if silently asking for guidance. After the game, as Marcus walked toward the locker room, he reflected on what he should do next. He felt indignation rising in his chest. "Why did this happen to me?" he thought as he walked in silence. His teammates tried to console him, but their words felt empty in the face of the gravity of the situation. He knew he had to do something, not just for himself, but for everyone who faced this kind of injustice. His parents waited for him at the end of the hallway, ready to embrace him. He knew that the conversation with them would be crucial in deciding his next steps. Marcus had been hurt, but something inside him was also awakening, the will to fight for justice. After the game, Marcus was silent on the way home. His parents could sense something was troubling him deeply, but they gave him space, knowing he would speak when he was ready. At dinner, the silence was finally broken when Marcus said, "It wasn't just about the game today." His mother, with a soft but concerned voice, asked, "What do you mean, Marcus?" He hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of what he was about to share. Then, with a mix of frustration and sadness, he told them about the racist comment from the opposing player. The words came out slowly, each one carrying the pain of the experience. His parents listened intently, their faces reflecting both empathy and concern. Marcus's father leaned forward, his face serious but calm. "Son, what happened to you today was wrong. No one should ever treat you that way." Marcus nodded, but inside, he felt torn. "What do I do now?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. His father took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "You have a choice, Marcus. You can let this hurt you and stay silent, or you can stand up and say something. You don't have to let them get away with this." His father's words hung in the air, filling Marcus with a growing sense of determination. It was a moment of revelation for the young boy. He realized that staying silent would only make the pain worse. That night, Marcus lay in bed, replaying the events of the day in his mind. The insult echoed in his thoughts, but so did his father's advice. He couldn't just ignore what had happened. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about making sure this didn't happen to anyone else. As he stared at the ceiling, Marcus made a decision. He wasn't going to stay quiet. Tomorrow, at the next game, he would confront the issue head-on. The thought both frightened and empowered him. He wasn't sure how people would react, but he knew it was the right thing to do. He fell asleep with a sense of resolve, knowing that tomorrow would be different. The next day, as Marcus walked into the gym, there was a different energy in him. His teammates noticed it too. They could sense that something was coming, but they didn't know exactly what. Before the game started, Marcus asked Coach Thompson if he could speak to the team. The coach, noticing the seriousness in Marcus's expression, nodded and gave him the floor. Marcus stood before his teammates, his heart racing, but his voice steady. "Yesterday, something happened that wasn't right. One of the players from the other team said something racist to me. And I can't just let that go," he began, his eyes scanning the room. His teammates listened in silence, some with shock, others with anger. After a brief pause, Marcus continued, "I know we all came here to play basketball, but some things are more important than the game. What happened yesterday wasn't just about me, it was about something bigger. And if we don't do anything about it, it will keep happening, not just to me, but to others too." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, there was complete silence in the gym. Coach Thompson looked at Marcus with pride, understanding the courage it took to speak out. The rest of the team exchanged glances, processing what Marcus had just said. They knew he was right, but no one had expected him to take such a bold stand. One of Marcus's teammates finally spoke up. "What are we going to do about it, then?" The question was simple, but it carried the weight of everything Marcus had been thinking about since the previous day. Marcus took a deep breath before answering, "I don't think we should play until this gets addressed. We need to make sure that people know this kind of behavior isn't okay." His suggestion was bold, and for a moment, there was a flicker of doubt in the room. But then, one by one, his teammates began to nod in agreement. They could see the truth in Marcus's words. It wasn't just about one game anymore, it was about standing up for what was right. Coach Thompson, seeing the resolve in his players, stood up and addressed the team. "If this is what you all want to do, "I'll stand by you," he said, his voice firm but supportive. "It takes a lot of courage to speak up like this, and I'm proud of you, Marcus." "Proud of all of you." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. For the first time since the incident, he didn't feel alone. His teammates were with him, and so was his coach. Together, they had made a decision that would echo far beyond the basketball court. It wasn't just about playing the game anymore. It was about challenging a system that had let this kind of injustice go unchecked for too long. As the team gathered at the edge of the court, ready to make their stand, Marcus felt a surge of confidence. The tension in the gym was palpable, with everyone wondering what would happen next. The opposing team was already warming up, unaware of the decision that had been made. Marcus's team lined up at the center of the court, their eyes focused, their expressions serious. Coach Thompson walked up to the referee and explained what was happening. "My team won't be playing today," he said. The referee, taken aback, looked confused. "Why not?" he asked. "Because until we address the racism that happened yesterday, we can't pretend like this is just another game." The referee's eyes widened as he realized the gravity of the situation. Marcus, standing beside his coach, felt the weight of the moment. The other team began to notice that something was wrong. The players stopped warming up and started whispering among themselves. Marcus's heart raced, but he stood tall, knowing that he was doing the right thing. The crowd in the stands started murmuring, confused by the delay. Slowly, the realization spread through the gym that something important was happening. Marcus had made his stand, and now the rest of the world would have to reckon with it. He wasn't just a player anymore. He was a voice for change. As Marcus stood at the center of the court, his teammates gathered around him. The air was thick with tension. The opposing team, still confused by the sudden halt in the game, watched from their side, unsure of what was happening. Marcus had just made a bold stand, refusing to play until the issue of racism was addressed. The silence in the gym was overwhelming. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Marcus felt his heart racing, unsure of how the other players and the crowd would react to his decision. He knew this moment would define everything: how his teammates saw him, how the other team would respond, and whether anyone would stand with him. Suddenly, the silence was broken. One of Marcus's teammates, a tall boy named Jamal, stepped forward. "Marcus is right," Jamal said, his voice firm but calm. "We can't just act like nothing happened. What happened yesterday wasn't okay, and we need to make sure it never happens again." Jamal's words echoed through the gym, and slowly, other members of the team began to nod in agreement. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him as his teammates stood by his side. It wasn't just him anymore. Together, they were making a stand. But then something completely unexpected happened. From the other side of the court, one of the players on the opposing team, a boy named Tyler, stepped forward. He had been one of the players who had remained silent during the incident the day before, but now he looked different, troubled. "I didn't say anything yesterday when I heard what was said," Tyler began, his voice shaking slightly. "I should have stood up and called it out right then. I'm sorry, Marcus." The apology hit Marcus harder than he expected. He wasn't sure how to respond at first. Tyler continued, "It wasn't right, and I don't think we should keep playing until this is dealt with either." The gym fell into an even deeper silence. No one had expected this. One by one, other players from Tyler's team began to speak up, some apologizing for staying silent, others expressing their support for Marcus's stand. "We're with you," one of them said. "If you're not playing, we're not playing either." It was as if the gym itself had taken a deep breath, witnessing a shift that no one could have predicted. Marcus felt an overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude. What started as a personal stand had become something much bigger, an act of unity, crossing team lines, and bringing everyone together against the common enemy of injustice. The coaches from both teams exchanged looks. Coach Thompson, who had supported Marcus from the beginning, nodded in approval as he saw the players come together. The coach of the opposing team, who had initially been hesitant to get involved, now approached Coach Thompson. "This is bigger than a game," he admitted. "I didn't realize it at first, but I see it now. We need to address this." It was a rare moment of solidarity between two rival teams. The referees, initially uncertain of how to handle the situation, now stood in quiet support. The decision had been made, not through official rules or regulations, but through the collective will of the players themselves. In the stands, the crowd had been murmuring, unsure of what was happening on the court. But as the reality of the situation became clear, a wave of understanding swept through the audience. Parents, students, and supporters began to clap, softly at first, then louder and louder. The applause wasn't for the game, but for the courage of the players who stood together, united against something far more important than the competition. Marcus looked around, overwhelmed by the support. He had taken a risk by speaking out, unsure of how people would react, but now it was clear that his stand had sparked something much greater than he had imagined. As Marcus stood there, surrounded by his teammates and even players from the opposing team, he realized that something powerful was happening. This wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't just about one racist comment made during a game. This was about all the times people had stayed silent in the face of injustice. It was about showing that, together, they could make a difference. Marcus felt a sense of pride swelling in his chest. He had been afraid to speak up at first, but now, seeing how everyone had come together, he knew he had made the right choice. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was a moment of revelation and unity. The referees called both teams together. "We need to address this issue properly," one of them said, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. "But for now, I think it's clear that today's game won't continue." Both teams nodded in agreement. The game wasn't important anymore. What mattered was the message they were sending, that racism had no place in their sport, in their lives, or anywhere. It was a powerful statement, made not by adults in authority, but by the children and young athletes who were standing up for what was right. The moment was heavy with emotion, and Marcus could feel the weight of it in every glance exchanged between the players. As the players began to leave the court, a local news reporter who had been covering the tournament rushed over to interview Marcus. "What made you decide to speak up?" she asked, holding the microphone out to him. Marcus, still processing everything that had just happened, took a moment to collect his thoughts. "It wasn't just about me," he said. "I knew that if I didn't say something, it would keep happening. To me, to other kids, to everyone who's ever faced this kind of thing. I just didn't want to stay silent anymore." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of the moment. The reporter nodded, recognizing the significance of his statement. By the time the gym emptied, the air felt lighter, almost as if a burden had been lifted from everyone present. Marcus's stand against racism had sparked something unexpected, a collective moment of solidarity and strength. His teammates patted him on the back as they headed to the locker room, and even players from the opposing team came up to him, shaking his hand and offering words of support. Marcus knew that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something much bigger, a movement that would spread beyond the walls of this gym. He had taken the first step, but now, united with others, they would continue the fight for justice, wherever it was needed. The aftermath of Marcus's stand sent ripples through the entire tournament. What began as a single moment of courage quickly grew into a broader conversation about racism and injustice in sports. The tournament organizers, initially caught off guard by the unexpected events on the court, realized that they could no longer ignore the issue. They called an emergency meeting with all the coaches, referees, and key players to address what had happened. Marcus's bold decision had forced their hand, and now, There was no going back. The tournament, once just another competition, had become the stage for something far more important. At the meeting, the organizers knew they had to take a clear stance. "This kind of behavior has no place in our tournament," the head organizer said, addressing the group. "We've let incidents like this go unnoticed for too long, but that ends now." It was a powerful statement, one that set the tone for what was to come. Marcus, sitting in the back of the room with his parents and Coach Thompson, felt a mixture of pride and relief. He hadn't expected his actions to spark such a response, but now it was clear that change was on the horizon. He had hoped for something small, maybe an apology, but this was turning into something much bigger. The tournament organizers announced a new set of policies aimed at combating discrimination on and off the court. There would be zero tolerance for any form of racist behavior, with strict penalties for players, coaches, or spectators who violated these rules. They also planned to introduce workshops and discussions about racism in sports, not just for the athletes, but for the entire community. "It's time we all take responsibility," the head organizer continued. "We need to educate ourselves, our players, and our fans about the impact of racism and how to actively stand against it." Marcus watched as everyone in the room nodded in agreement. This wasn't just about punishing bad behavior. It was about creating a culture of respect and understanding. As word of the new policies spread, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Local media outlets picked up the story, praising the tournament for taking a firm stance against racism. Schools from across the region began reaching out to the organizers, asking for guidance on how they could implement similar measures in their own sports programs. What had started as a difficult and painful moment for Marcus was now evolving into something that would have a lasting impact on the entire community. "I never imagined that standing up for myself would lead to all this," Marcus told his father one evening after practice. His father smiled, proud of what his son had accomplished. "Sometimes, son, it only takes one person to make a difference." Back at school, Marcus noticed a shift in how people treated him. His classmates, who once only saw him as the star basketball player, now looked at him with a new sense of respect. Teachers and students alike would stop him in the hallways, offering words of support and admiration. "You're really brave for what you did," one of his classmates said, patting him on the back. Marcus, still getting used to the attention, would often smile shyly and thank them. He hadn't sought fame or recognition. He had simply wanted to do what was right. But now, it seemed like his actions were inspiring others to think more deeply about how they treated those around them. The other players from Marcus's team also felt the impact of what had happened. Many of them began to reflect on their own behavior, realizing that they, too, had a responsibility to stand up against injustice. "I never really thought about it before," one of his teammates admitted during practice. "But after what happened, I realize how important it is to speak up when we see something wrong." This new sense of awareness spread throughout the team, fostering a culture of openness and respect. Coach Thompson, always a guiding figure, encouraged the boys to continue having these conversations. "It's not just about basketball," he told them. "It's about how you carry yourselves in life. That's the real test." The change wasn't limited to Marcus's team. Across the tournament, other teams began to have similar discussions about racism and sportsmanship. Players who had previously stayed silent during moments of injustice now felt empowered to speak up. Coaches, once focused solely on winning, began to realize that they had a role to play in shaping the character of their players. The tournament had become a platform for dialogue, a place where difficult conversations could take place, and where real change could begin. Marcus's stand had sparked a movement, and now, everyone involved was committed to making sure that the lessons learned on the court would extend far beyond the final whistle. As the tournament drew to a close, the impact of Marcus's actions could be felt in every corner of the event. The final game was played with a sense of camaraderie and mutual respect that hadn't been there at the start. The atmosphere in the gym had shifted, from one of competition and rivalry to one of solidarity and unity. Players from different teams, who once saw each other as mere opponents, now exchanged words of encouragement and support. The referees, too, were more attentive, ensuring that the new policies were enforced and that the game remained a safe space for everyone. It was clear that this tournament would be remembered, not for the scores or the trophies, but for the stand that Marcus had taken. After the final game, the tournament organizers held a closing ceremony to acknowledge the efforts of all the players and coaches. But instead of focusing on the usual awards for athletic performance, they made a special announcement. Marcus Johnson was called to the center of the court, where the head organizer presented him with a special award for courage and leadership. "This young man showed us all what it means to stand up for what's right," the organizer said, handing Marcus the trophy. The crowd erupted in applause, a standing ovation for the boy who had turned a moment of pain into a movement for change. Marcus stood there, holding the trophy, feeling a mix of pride, humility, and a deep sense of responsibility. As Marcus left the court that day, he knew that his journey was far from over. The tournament had come to an end, but the fight for justice was ongoing. He had learned that change doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen alone. It takes perseverance, compassion, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. Marcus understood that his role as a leader wasn't limited to the basketball court. He had a voice, and now he knew how powerful that voice could be when used for the right reasons. Walking out of the gym with his parents by his side, Marcus felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he had the strength to face them. The events of the tournament left a lasting impression on Marcus and his teammates, far beyond what any victory or defeat on the court could have done. For Marcus, the experience was transformative. He had entered the tournament as a 10-year-old boy who loved basketball, focused on winning and improving his skills. But now, he walked away not just as an athlete, but as a young leader who had faced one of life's toughest challenges head-on. It was a revelation to him. He had found a new kind of strength within himself, a courage he hadn't known he possessed. The Marcus who once feared confrontation had now become a voice for change. At first, Marcus wasn't sure how to process everything that had happened. He had been thrust into a situation much bigger than basketball, and while he was proud of the stand he had taken, it was still overwhelming. His parents were his biggest support system during this time. His mother, always the calming presence, often reminded him that what he did wasn't just about that one game. "You've inspired people, Marcus. You've shown that one person can make a difference," she told him one evening. His father, who had been with him every step of the way, also took the opportunity to talk to him about what it meant to be a leader. "Being a leader means standing up, even when it's uncomfortable," his father said. "And you did that. I couldn't be prouder." Marcus's teammates were also deeply affected by the events of the tournament. Many of them had never been forced to confront issues like racism so directly before, and Marcus's decision to speak out had opened their eyes. One of his closest friends on the team, David, admitted to Marcus that he hadn't really thought about how much words could hurt. "I never knew how serious it was until I saw how much it affected you," David said quietly one day after practice. "I've heard stuff like that before, but I never realized how wrong it was." Marcus appreciated his friend's honesty, and the conversation deepened their bond. It was clear that the experience had changed not only how they saw the game, but how they saw each other as individuals. The unity within the team became stronger after the incident. The boys no longer just saw each other as teammates, they had become brothers in a shared cause. They had all witnessed the power of standing together against something unjust, and that lesson stuck with them. Coach Thompson noticed the shift in their attitudes as well. Practices became more than just drills and exercises. They became moments for the team to talk, to share their thoughts and feelings about what had happened. "We're not just here to play basketball," Coach Thompson reminded them. "We're here to grow as people. This sport is about character as much as it's about skill. Beyond the court, Marcus's personal growth was undeniable. He became more confident, not just in his abilities as a player, but in his ability to make a difference. His grades in school improved as well, as he applied the same focus and determination to his studies that he had shown on the court. His teachers noticed the change, commenting on how much more engaged and self-assured he seemed. "It's like a switch flipped in you," one of his teachers told him. Marcus wasn't sure how to explain it, but he knew that standing up for what he believed in had unlocked something inside him, a sense of purpose that went beyond basketball. The impact on the rest of the team was just as profound. Each player began to reflect on their role, not just as athletes, but as individuals who could shape the world around them. Jamal, the teammate who had been one of the first to stand with Marcus, took it upon himself to become more involved in school activities, especially those focused on promoting equality and inclusion. "I don't want anyone else to feel like Marcus did," Jamal explained to his friends. His words resonated with the team, and soon, many of the players followed his lead, joining school clubs and initiatives that focused on combating bullying and discrimination. The ripple effect of Marcus's stand continued to spread. Even the players who had been more hesitant to speak out at first began to understand the importance of their actions. Tyler, the boy from the opposing team who had apologized to Marcus during the tournament, reached out to Marcus afterward. "I wish I'd spoken up sooner," Tyler admitted during one of their conversations. "But I'm glad you did." The two boys, once competitors on the court, became friends off of it, united by the experience they had shared. Tyler's teammates also began to reflect on their role in what had happened, and many of them took the opportunity to educate themselves on issues of race and inequality. For Marcus, the journey was far from over. He realized that standing up to injustice wasn't something that happened once, it was a continuous effort. There would always be challenges ahead, but now, he felt more prepared to face them. His teammates, too, understood that the lessons they had learned went beyond the basketball court. The tournament had changed them all, not just as players, but as young men who now understood the importance of standing together and speaking out. Marcus had set an example for them, and they were determined to carry that lesson forward, both in their sports careers and in their everyday lives. As the basketball season continued, the bond between the teammates only grew stronger. They played with a new sense of purpose, not just for the love of the game, but for the values they now represented. Their victories felt sweeter, not because of the points they scored, but because they knew they were playing for something bigger than themselves. And even in defeat, they held their heads high, knowing that the real victory lay in the unity and strength they had built. Marcus, once just a talented player, had become a leader both on and off the court, and his teammates followed his example with pride. The personal impact of Marcus's decision continued to ripple outward, affecting not only his team but the entire school community. Other students began to talk more openly about issues of fairness and respect, inspired by what they had seen on the basketball court. Marcus had sparked something bigger than he ever imagined, and as he walked through the halls of his school, he felt a sense of fulfillment. He knew that his journey was just beginning, but he also knew that he wasn't walking it alone. His teammates, his school, and even his new friends like Tyler were all part of a movement toward something better. As the tournament came to an end and the buzz around Marcus's stand began to settle, it became clear that the impact of his actions would last far beyond a single season. Marcus had become a symbol of change, not just for his school, but for the entire basketball community in the region. His decision to speak out against racism and injustice had sparked a movement that no one could have predicted. Schools across the area began implementing new initiatives aimed at promoting equality, respect, and sportsmanship, all inspired by the courage of a 10-year-old boy who refused to stay silent. What had started as a moment of personal bravery had now turned into a legacy. At Marcus's school, the change was immediate. The administration, recognizing the importance of what had happened during the tournament, worked with the basketball team and other student groups to create a new code of conduct. This code wasn't just about following rules on the court, it was about how players should treat each other with respect, both during games and in everyday life. Basketball is a team sport, but life is about more than just the game, the principal said during a school assembly, where the new policies were introduced. Marcus stood at the front of the gym, feeling a mix of pride and humility as he watched his school embrace the lessons that had come from his experience. One of the biggest changes that came from Marcus's stand was the introduction of regular workshops and discussions on diversity and inclusion. These sessions weren't just for athletes. They were open to all students and focused on understanding different perspectives, challenging stereotypes, and fostering an environment where everyone felt valued. Marcus often participated in these discussions, sharing his story and encouraging others to speak up when they encountered injustice. "If we don't stand up for each other, who will?" he would ask, his words resonating with his peers. The workshops became a safe space for students to express their thoughts and feelings, and the sense of community at the school grew stronger. Marcus's influence extended beyond his own school as well. Other schools in the region took notice of what was happening and began reaching out to Marcus's coach and the tournament organizers for advice on how to implement similar changes. Soon, a network of schools was formed, all committed to creating a more inclusive and supportive environment for their students and athletes. This new culture of respect and understanding didn't just make basketball games better, it made the entire school experience more positive for everyone involved. Students who had once felt isolated or marginalized now felt seen and heard, and it was all thanks to the courage of one boy who had dared to speak out. The Regional Basketball League also took steps to ensure that the lessons from Marcus's stand were incorporated into their policies. New rules were introduced that focused on holding players, coaches, and even fans accountable for their behavior. Any incidents of racism or discrimination would be met with immediate consequences, and the league worked to promote the message that sports were for everyone, regardless of background. Marcus was invited to speak at the league's annual meeting, where he shared his experience and the importance of standing up for what's right. His speech was met with thunderous applause, and many league officials thanked him personally for the example he had set. As the years went by, Marcus's legacy continued to grow. Younger players, who had heard about what happened during the tournament, looked up to him as a role model. For them, Marcus wasn't just a talented basketball player. He was someone who had shown them that they, too, had the power to make a difference. "I want to be like Marcus," one young player told his coach during practice. "Not just because he's good at basketball, but because he's brave." Marcus often visited local schools and community centers, speaking to younger kids about the importance of integrity, respect, and standing up for what's right. His words carried weight, not because of his athletic abilities, but because of the example he had set. At his own school, Marcus's influence became a part of the culture. The basketball team had adopted a new motto, "More than a game." It was a reminder that their time on the court was about more than just winning. It was about how they carried themselves as individuals and how they treated others. The team took great pride in this motto, and it showed in the way they played. Their games were competitive, but they were always marked by respect and sportsmanship. Win or lose, they understood that the values they upheld mattered far more than the final score. Marcus, who had once been the quiet player focused solely on his performance, was now the heart of the team, leading by example in every way. Even outside of basketball, the impact of Marcus's actions could be felt throughout the school. Other sports teams, clubs, and student organizations adopted similar principles, fostering an environment of inclusivity and mutual support. The school had become a place where students felt empowered to stand up for themselves and each other, knowing that they would be supported. Marcus had helped create a culture where everyone felt they belonged, and where no one had to fear being treated unfairly. His legacy had taken root, and it was growing stronger with each passing year. Marcus's story continued to inspire even after he moved on from elementary school. As he advanced through his education, he carried the lessons he had learned with him, always mindful of the impact his actions could have on those around him. He continued to be a voice for change, both on and off the court, and his influence extended far beyond his local community. News of his stand against racism had spread, and he was often invited to speak at events and conferences, sharing his story with audiences who were eager to hear how one person's actions could spark a movement. Marcus never sought the spotlight, but he embraced the responsibility that came with being a leader. By the time Marcus reached high school, his legacy had become firmly entrenched in the fabric of the school and the local community. He had proven that courage and compassion could create lasting change, and his actions had inspired countless others to follow his example. The new culture that had developed within the school basketball program was stronger than ever, with players, coaches, and fans all embracing the values of respect, integrity, and inclusivity. Marcus's legacy was no longer just his. It belonged to everyone who had been touched by his story, and it would continue to shape the future of the community for years to come. Now, here's the question. What would you do if you were in Marcus's shoes? Would you have the courage to stand up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when no one else is speaking out? Marcus showed us that change doesn't happen when we stay silent. It happens when we choose to act, even if we're standing alone. But here's the beauty of it. Marcus wasn't alone for long. His courage inspired others to join him, to fight for what's right, and together, they created something bigger than just a game. And the truth is, we all have that power. Every day, we face moments where we can stand up for justice, for kindness, for equality. The question is, will you? So, what are you going to do with the knowledge you've gained today? How will you apply it in your life, in your community, and in the moments that matter? It's not always easy to speak up, but you've seen firsthand how one voice can spark a movement. And if you want to keep learning how to make a difference, you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and stay with us as we dive deeper into stories like Marcus's. Stories that challenge us, inspire us, and show us the power we all hold to create change.